Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, and welcome to This Week in North America. Well, we have a lot to report to you tonight. a great program because we're going to have really great guests joining us. To begin with, folks, we are going to have a Pastor Lee from Montclair, New Jersey. He's a great pastor here with a wonderful church. And I asked him to join us to help us pay tribute to National Prayer Day here in the United States of America. We actually have a prayer day that was commissioned by the United States Congress years ago. And this would be a day of prayer and reflection for our country, for freedom and for liberty. It's very, very important to us, so I thought it'd be appropriate to have the pastor on this evening. Then I'm going to give you an update on the SOS campaign. I believe you'll be pleased what you're going to hear. I'm certainly pleased over the response, and I'll share with you some of the specifics halfway through the broadcast. And then I'll tell you, I had occasion to speak with a Canadian military veteran, Michael Bell. He's going to be here tonight with us. Folks, I got to tell you, Mike Bell is a veteran who risked his life to save American Marines in Beirut, Lebanon, when the bombing took place on a barracks. And I remember when that happened, and U.S. Marines were being were killed, many injured, and Mike risked his life to save many of them. So he'll be with us after I give you the SOS report. Now, I did interview these gentlemen earlier, so I do have them on tape, or I guess we don't use tape anymore. I have them on video, and so I'm going to now share with you the discussion I had with Pastor Lee. You'll find this guy to be genuine, refreshing, and I just wish there were more pastors like him around this country, perhaps even around the world. So here we go, folks. Pastor Lee. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining me again this evening. In the United States of America, it's National Prayer Week. And we've on this broadcast have always said to our audience worldwide that we're not only a secular broadcast that delivers news and commentary and opinion on the geopolitical problems and challenges we have around the world, but we also bring the spiritual aspect of what we need to do in order to secure freedom, liberty, peace, and prosperity. So there's a lot more involved in this fight for freedom and liberty and the things we want than just politics and military might, etc. But there's something called prayer. There's something called seeking God, Jesus Christ, for the help we need. So I have a great guest on. I'm going to bring him on right now. A great guy that I've known for a few years. His name is Pastor Lee. And Pastor, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Of course, pleasure's mine.
Well, I'll start off, Pastor, if you could please familiarize our audience with who you are, where your church is, and what you're doing now with regard to actually building a wonderful, beautiful congregation there in Montclair, New Jersey.
Thanks. My name's Pastor Lee Grzywinski. I am pastor of the Montclair Community Church, which is in Upper Montclair on Watchung Avenue. As we like to say, community is our middle name, and our church is built on the community that we have there. It is not a one-man show by any stretch. I am just one of the gears in the machine there. We have a wonderful congregation of people who love God and who have a heart for others outside of our building. So God is doing a wonderful work there, building us up because of the love that he's given to the entire congregation, for the lost, for the world, for our country, and for Montclair.
You know, I guess about a month ago now, I've been so busy traveling around. My wife and I had come to your church service, and it was wonderful. I mean, from the second we stepped foot, not into church, but on church property, we were welcomed like we were family. Yeah. And I've got to tell you, what a comfortable, peaceful event to go to. I call it an event. It's really, church service, but to go to when you're facing so many problems in the outside world and every day in and out, bad news and all stuff, all kinds of things coming down upon you. But it was a pleasure being there. So I certainly give you kudos to your leadership and what your church is doing. Pastor, I've asked you to come on tonight because, as I said, it is National Prayer Week here in the United States. We do have thousands of people from Canada and many from Europe also tuning in, as well as obviously in our country. But there's two things happening with me. I get hundreds of letters a month, literally hundreds of letters a month from people who share with me their distress, the pain that they're suffering inside themselves with regard to the bad news, the media, the politics, the hatred, the fighting they see on the internet. They pour their hearts out, and they seem to have got to a point where they're so distressed they don't know what to do. And then on the other matter, when I go out and make speeches, and I'm talking about political speeches, I kind of adopted what Ronald Reagan did. I added scripture to some of the speeches, in fact, all of them that I make. And interesting enough, every place I went to, people will always come up and say, oh, good speech, good job. But what I found as a common thread, many of those people would come up and say, out of everything you said, it was what you said about the Bible, what you said about Christ, what you said about the scripture. And I learned through that there is a hunger and thirst across this planet for Jesus Christ. So could you share with all of these people right now that hope is not lost, but that there is hope in Christ? And I asked you to do it because, I prayed, I did. I said, Lord, who shall I ask to come on? Well, you know what? The Holy Spirit gave me that instruction, and you actually took up that call. And I thank you for that.
Of course. Yeah. And there is hope. I think the problem for many, many people is that in the Western world over the last few decades, we've made strides, and we understand that it's more than physical health. There's a focus on mental health, a focus on emotional health. And I think that what happened through this pandemic, that we were all locked away for so many years, we realized the relational health is such a big part of that. So now, even in the public square, in the public schools, and in the media, you see this understanding of the holistic nature of man, that we are physical, we are mental, we are emotional and relational beings. But we're missing a big part of that because the spiritual is still hands off in the public square. And this is why so many people feel they feel that they're missing something, but don't know what it is. And what they're missing is that spiritual aspect to their lives. And without being whole people, we lose hope. And so the hope is in Jesus Christ. The hope is in God and a relationship with him. And prayer is so needed right now in our country. It's so needed for everybody. And this isn't on my part a political push to say put prayer back in school. Look, we're teaching partial children when we don't teach them about the spiritual. We are a society full of partial people when we don't have a spiritual side. So we need prayer because we need to get back to being whole people the way God designed us to be, because that is where we find our hope. When we find God and we turn to him in prayer, we not only find him and the hope he gives us, we find what we were meant to be, how we were created to be. So we need prayer. We need to get on our knees and turn to God and ask him to make us whole people, because partial people can't fix a broken society. We can't fix a broken world. Only God can do that. And until we're whole people turning wholly to God, we can't expect much to change. Like I like to say to people in my congregation, if you don't change anything, nothing's going to change. And on the surface, that sounds so kind of dumb, of course. But yet we've been trying to make changes for how long now in our world, to turn away from the brokenness and from the danger that's out there, legitimate fears that people have of what's out there. What needs to change? We need to turn to God. The change needs to be a change that happens in our prayer closet, on our knees, praying to our Lord.
Pastor, to your point, we've had some pastors from Canada on, and I understand one from America has just been arrested for praying at a public meeting. The pastors in Canada literally during the church service, and we have the videos where actually behind the pulpit preaching when the police actually stormed the church and attempted to drag him out. He's won some court cases, etc. But my point is this, is that there seems to be an attack on the Judeo-Christian values, on the Christian church. And of course, people would say to me, well, what can we do? You hear people want to rally. They want to do all sorts of different activist things, which is fine. But I share with them that, I've come to a point where I believe, and this is right to your point, that the best thing, the most powerful thing we could do is pray. People seem to think, well, prayer does nothing, but I happen to believe it does everything. And the battle for freedom and liberty, the battle for getting our governments restored to where God is supreme, is on our knees in the church and at home. My question to you is, do you believe? I believe you do, but maybe you could help me emphasize this, that, I once heard a minister say that the tallest person in the world is the one on their knees. But the power of prayer, if we could talk about that a minute, the power of prayer, we see it throughout the Bible, how powerful it is. But today people are taking prayer and saying, well, I'll say a prayer or two, but what sense does it make?
Yeah, unfortunately, many, even Christians, true believing Christians, we tend to look at prayer as a wish list, that we come to God and we say, God, please do this. God, please give me this. And it's usually a last resort. When someone we love gets sick, when we're in danger of losing our job, we turn to God and say, God, please do this good thing for me, or give me this good thing, or don't let the bad thing happen. But prayer is really so much more than that, according to the Bible. It is a relationship that we have with God. It isn't just about coming before him and asking for things. It's about coming to him as the supreme being, as the one who can change things that we cannot change, and being in communion with him. And prayer does change things. And the problem is, I think a lot of times prayer doesn't change things the exact way we want them to change things. We often come to God with a 10-point plan of, God, I want this, and then please do this, and then please do this. And I think we miss a lot of times what God is doing, because he's not doing things our way. But I thank God he doesn't do things our way. I also thank God that one of the things that prayer changes immediately is the prayer. There is an air of divisiveness in our country. I'm sure you've noticed. I think everybody's noticed. And when you come to somebody with an opposing view, the standard now is, oh, that's an enemy, and we're going to fight about it, and I'm going to accuse them, they're going to accuse me. It usually degenerates into name calling and all these other things. But what happens is, when we pray, when we say, God, I don't like what's going on in this particular aspect of our society, and we get on our knees and we pray, not just for that, but for the people. Say, God, I pray for those people who are thinking this is good when your word says it's not. I pray for these people who have just accepted this air of divisiveness. God, I pray that you would soften their hearts, and that you would soften my heart towards them. And you'll find, when you pray for these people on the other side of the political fence, of people from different denominations, if you're a Christian, just the guy across the street who you keep arguing with, when you pray for these people, God changes you. And you were able better then to communicate with these people. Their defenses go down when you come at them lovingly, as opposed to coming at them with a challenge. And when you pray, God softens you to them and them to you. And that's a major hurdle, I think, in making progress on a lot of issues.
With regard to progress, there are many people, perhaps again around the world, who are very concerned about their children going to public schools. Our governments are leaning so far to the left that we've seen in some countries, and now in America, an influence of atheism and communism, again targeting Christians and those of the Jewish faith. But I find something that maybe we need to do, and I'm going to ask you about this. Our public schools, of course, are worldwide, are not teaching about God, about Christ, about prayer. A lot of what we learned in school is not being taught there. You mentioned prayer in school. But I tend to believe that, we need to get involved politically, and God's called some of us to do that, and to get legislations changed, and to vote for people who are going to support the Judeo-Christian values in which we are raised upon. But I tend to believe that perhaps the most powerful way to fight that fight is at home. Our parents teaching our children about the Bible, about biblical principles, the stories of Moses and David. I mean, those aren't just fantasy stories or fairy tales. They're real life stories. So the need for parents to understand that they, in this day and age, in this 21st century, have a grave responsibility to do that. But my question to you is this, and maybe you could answer it through what you're doing in your church, because I've seen what you're doing, and it's really magnificent. There are parents who will say, well, where can I go? What can I do? Where can I learn? I, as a parent, don't even know where to start. So when you run into a situation like that, where do you guide them?
I think it's very important, as you said. I just want to second what you said. I think it's been forgotten that as parents, we have the responsibility for teaching our children, for raising our children. And just dropping our children off at the public schools and saying they'll do it is I think, a failure on our part. And I think that it started with my generation, I would say. I'll take partial responsibility for that. We, I think, forgot that it's our responsibility to educate our kids. But to your point, parents need to know the truth if they're going to teach their children the truth. And it's very important for families together to study the word together, to pray together. You form no more an intimate bond with somebody than you do when you pray with them. But for parents, there are great, and it's not a plug for my church, there are great communities of faith out there. There are great communities of faith right here in northern New Jersey, where there are people who will love you for who you are and bring you along in your faith walk. Christianity was never meant to be a solo project. So as adults, what we need to do, especially when we have children, I'll be honest, it was the fact that we had children that made me seriously consider what I was doing and where my focus was in life that drew me to God. So we need to, as parents, as adults, we need to take very seriously the truth. Because what's getting lost, I think, in a lot of legislation, what's getting lost in a lot of teaching in public schools is truth. So there are great communities of faith that we can go to, be together with other men and women of faith on Sunday mornings, be together with them during the week. There are groups that get together at our church and all these other churches. And it's not sit down and hardcore Bible study and, I don't want to do that because, it's too over my head. It's about being together. It's about sharing each other's burdens. It's about becoming part of a community that cries with you when you're sorrowful, that celebrates with you when you're joyful. We can't do this alone. And a big part of that is coming together with our brothers and sisters in Christ, getting on our knees together and praying for each other. Doing it alone it's a horrible thing. And I think experience would tell most people doing it alone leads to failure. So getting involved, and I mean involved, not just showing up a couple times a month to a worship service. I mean, getting involved with the people that are there, the people that love you, the people that want to help you along in your walk and to understand God's truth better. There are people out there who want to support you in this. So get involved in a good church.
Pastor, I remember years ago, I met with numerous pastors around the state of New Jersey, some in Florida, Texas. And sometimes a pastor would say to me, well, what can we do for you politically? What can we do to help with legislation? What can we do to help make change in our state or our country? And I would share with them this, and I was a little stunned over one answer I got from one pastor some time ago. I said, you know what? The best thing you could do is to talk to your congregants about sin, about the need to get away from sin and how to deal with sin. Because, in our fight for freedom and liberty, I believe the first fight needs to be the fight for the soul, for the spirit, and you fight sin. But that pastor actually said to me that, well, if I start talking about sin in my church, they're going to leave. And I was kind of stunned over that. Then I looked around and I realized as time went on, a lot of churches are empty today. Now, one thing I saw about your church that I actually commented to my wife, I said, could you believe there's people here? This place is really, really well attended here. And then when you began to speak and you spoke from the Bible, I said, there it is. There's the answer. So my question to you is this regarding pastors. I get a lot of letters from people saying, look, I go to church and you know what? There's nothing there to be convicted about. I remember going years ago, I heard some of these preachers. I said, wow. I said, man, I better get back here because I got some serious problems in my life. So I'd like to talk to you about that a little, that the battle being in the soul. We talk about the battle for freedom and liberty all the time, right? Individual rights all the time. But how about that battle for the soul? Because I don't believe a lot of people really know that there is a fight going on right now for their souls and their spirits.
There is. There definitely is. And in any case, people who don't know that they need help usually won't accept help. And so when we in the church, especially as pastors from the pulpit, when we give the good news and we talk about the salvation that Jesus brings, well, salvation from what? What do we need to be saved from? And so it's really important, especially in the church. And I think that we, by and large, have failed in the last few decades. It's important in the church to talk very openly and honestly about sin. I'm not afraid to tell people, look, I know I'm broken. I know I need fixing, and I know I can't fix myself. And people need to hear that they're broken and that they need fixing and that it's only God that can fix them. Nobody likes to be told they're wrong. I know I don't. So when people talk about sin, they feel like, well, I'm going to tell this person they're wrong. And this is part of that, just that spirit of the age where you can't tell people they're wrong because then you're being divisive and then you're trying to just preach morality. That's not what it is. Sin is part of who we are. We're broken creatures. We need God to make us whole. And I think that if that gets lost, people don't care about being saved unto God if they don't know what they're being saved from. And it's so important for us to take very seriously the reality of our sin, the reality of the fact we can lie to others. I can tell you, no, I look down on this person for doing that, and I don't do that, and I don't do this. You know what? When it's just me alone in my bedroom, the door closed, I know deep inside things I've thought, things I've said, things I've done. I don't let anybody else know about them, but God knows. And that's what we need to be saved from. We need to be saved from our sin. And it's so important that message is told to people. It's not going to be popular, but God doesn't call us to tickle the ears, right? We're not here to tell people what they want to hear and not tell them what they don't want to hear. We just want to tell them the truth. And the truth is that we are all, even the most holy Christian you could think of, we're all sinners who need God.
Pastor, before we wrap things up, as I said, there are thousands of people in Canada, and I won't go over the specifics with you. We don't have enough time, but I would say they need prayer. They needed to hear what you said today, as well as people in our country. It's just the oppression, the spiritual depression people are facing. But I believe you lifted me up. You lifted me up tonight. So that I certainly appreciate. Any last words before we leave?
I just want to circle back to one thing I've said a few times. This comes down to truth. There may be people out there who think this whole God thing, this whole Bible thing just isn't true, and they have their ideas of what's true. But funny thing about truth is that whether you believe it or not, it is true. And I just encourage everybody, seek what the real truth is. Because when you come to a knowledge of what the truth is, it points you right to God, and God meets every need.
Well, Pastor, you've been a blessing to me and my wife. You're going to see us soon. We're going to be back in the area. We're going to come back to your church. We love coming there. And I don't know how to thank you other than say I'll put you on my prayer list. And I pray that God does great things for you because you were a godsend. At this point in time, in our country, I know in Canada and those around the world, seeking something. And you gave them not something, you gave them everything in what you said. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
God bless you. See you soon.
I'll see you.
Bye-bye. All right, folks, what a pastor, right? I wish there were more pastors like him around. And, as I think about what he said, we are so involved in the fight for freedom as we should be, so involved in that fight. And we're looking at fighting this war for freedom more so from a secular perspective than from a spiritual perspective. And the more we go down that road, of building our lives, souls, and spirits in the church community and God's community, they always lose and we always win. All right, before we bring this hero on, I'm going to call him a hero because he is. Before I bring Mike Bell on, I want to give you an update on the SOS campaign, share with you what's going on, and you need to know a few things. To begin with, folks, it's going real well. The letters are starting to come in. I must tell you, they're coming in, a lot are coming in, and I'm pleasantly surprised that more than I thought at this time are coming in from American citizens. So that tells me they're watching, your voice is being heard, and American citizens from coast to coast are getting letters. They're certainly going to be standing with you. Now, people have asked me, well, what is the purpose of the letters? Well, look at folks, we hope to get at least 250,000. But no matter what amount we end up with, we're going to bring them to Washington, D.C. Letters are going to be going ahead of time to our congressional representatives. We want to show them physically that the Canadian people are looking for help. Well, what kind of help? All they want you to do is understand what's going on in Canada and do whatever you could peacefully within the framework of the law. diplomatically to, send a message to those individuals who are running the government in Canada that you've got to back off when it comes to taking the freedom and liberty away from the people in your country. Now, of course, the Canadian government could say, well, you got your own problems, mind your own business. They could say that. But the fact of the matter is that I'm worried, I'm fearful that it could get to a point that it gets so bad, whether it be Canada, Mexico, or any other country, that the devil, if you will, behind all of this is the Chinese Communist Party. They're working overtime. They're working overtime in the United States. They're working overtime in Canada. They're coming after North America because we are the greatest continent on the face of the earth. Canada, America, greatest countries when it comes to freedom and liberty on the face of the earth. So you've got to be blind not to see what's happening in both countries. Now, I'm pleased to say in the United States, and I want to emphasize this, we have made significant progress in getting rid of the influence of Chinese Communist Party's members in this country. The police stations in New York are gone. The critical race theory programs that have been introduced and all of these other immoral, ungodly, disgusting policies, from defund the police to teach our kids that, well, it's okay to identify yourself as a different sex. It's fine. All of that, folks, all of that, and I know I get heat when I mention it, all of that, at least in my view, is from the pit of hell. And you know what else is from the pit of hell? The Chinese Communist Party. And then we have lawmakers in America and in Canada embracing those policies. Those policies are designed to destroy us, not to help us. But the fact of the matter is that I've seen something significantly occur in the United States. We have waited patiently. Believe me, we know what you're going through in Canada. Patience, patience, patience. And I remember people saying, well, all of the letter writing and all of the things we're doing, it's not getting anywhere. And we have said to the American people, and I say this to the Canadian people, I know it doesn't seem like you're moving forward, but you are. We've had people in America say, well, let's rally and let's commit acts of violence. We've seen that, folks, in America. They think that acts of violence and being destructive and hurting the rest of the country is going to get them somewhere here in the United States. It has never been that to bring the government to a point of success, to bring our efforts against the government to a point of success. Violence does nothing but hurt the cause for freedom and liberty. It does nothing. We are living proof of that here in America because instead of resorting to violence, the irony is that the other side, all right, the agitators, those who are looking to destroy this country, would go to rallies where people in America have rallied peacefully, and these anarchists would show up and destroy the entire movement because they wait for this to happen. And who do you think, folks? Who do you think is the driving force of these violent people, or people who are saying, well, let's fight. Let's go to war with the United States government. Let's do this and let's do that. Who do you think is behind that, folks? Not the freedom-loving people, but the Chinese Communist Party. Now, I would say this. People get aggravated. People get upset. And sure, they want to fight. Sure, they want to do it. But until all avenues, every single avenue, in a peaceful way is exhausted, until that happens, folks, there should be no talk of doing anything else. And nobody in the United States, and I believe in Canada or anywhere else, unless you're maybe in France, I don't know what's going on there. It's a bad situation there, but at least here in North America, we haven't gotten there yet. And I don't think we'll ever get there to a point where all we want to do is go out and see buildings burned and people killed. My goodness. We have a Constitution of the United States in this country, and it works. And the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in your country and the laws of your country, it may seem like it's not working now, and to a great degree it isn't. I know. We know. We've seen that happen in America, and in some cases it's still happening in America. I'm waiting for Hunter Biden to get locked up and go to prison. I'm waiting for Joe Biden, after we discovered today what went on when he was vice president. I'm waiting for him to get impeached and thrown out of office. my point is we're waiting because we are doing something. We're doing it within the framework of the law. It's slow. It is a slow process, believe me. But it keeps the country together. It keeps us all together because once the Chinese Communist Party and people in the United States of America or in Canada or anywhere else on earth begin to talk violent confrontation, then everything we've worked for is going to go to hell in a handbasket. So this is why we haven't seen great degrees of violence in America. And there's been calls for people to do those things because the people believe that what they're doing in a peaceful way is working. And it is working. So the SOS campaign is following that lead. I believe that once we bring a few 100,000 letters to the U.S. Congress, I believe that it's going to raise an awareness in that lawmaking body and in this country that they're going to have to do something to at least communicate with the government north of us and say, hey, look, guys, you're going to have to think twice before you start doing this stuff because this could, and here's the thing here, folks, because this could hurt the national security of the United States of America. So America is on its way right now because of what we did through the electoral process. America is on its way to restore freedom and liberty. And we are. You don't see it. You don't hear it. On local levels, we've taken over school boards. We who? The Republican Party, if you will, the party that believes in freedom and liberty and parental rights and individual rights. We're taking over school board by school board by school board, city council by city council. We've taken over a number of state assemblies, state senates, gubernatorial races, and wait and you see what's going to happen in 24. We're going to take the entire country back without one shot being fired. Think about that one. So we're asking people to be patient. And we're going to do everything we could here to help anyone in the world. And we've done that. America has done that historically. Help anyone in the world to protect their freedom and liberty. But we have a vested interest in Canada because you're on our border. And I believe with all my heart, we do this the right way, the lawful way. Certainly they lose and we win. Now, it's not just Campaign America that is involved in the fight to protect freedom and liberty here in America and the United States. But you've got some real good leaders in your country, and I'm going to name them tonight. Great leaders in your country on the front lines fighting for freedom and liberty in a peaceful, lawful way. And they are making progress. When we got on the air last week, just 1 week ago, and we talked about the SOS project. We talked about what we asked people to do. We've got nearly 70,000 hits, 70,000 views, 70,000 views. And God knows how many people were viewing. And every day the numbers are climbing as people are sharing. But it wasn't just because of what we did. It's because of what the people of Canada did and their leaders. People like Alan Nicholson and his wife, Carol. People like David Dolan. People like Freedom George Billings from Alberta. Serena Freedom Bear from BC. Ron Clark from Alberta. Jason LaFauci from Sunbury, Ontario. What about Shadow Davis? Look at the hard work this guy's doing from Winnipeg. Patty A. McIntyre from Ontario. Tony Lahones from Nova Scotia. Nicholas Iwanchuk from Alberta. Jeffrey Gibson from Nova Scotia. Jesse Hall, the missing link from Alberta. Dana Metcalf from Raven News. She's from Newfoundland. Wayne Navari, New Brunswick. Corporal Jean Payette, Quebec. Matt Cross from Nova Scotia. Real News from Nova Scotia. Sergeant Jean Frenetti, Quebec. Colonel Vincent Parzay, Quebec. Sergeant Lieutenant Pierre Talbot, Quebec. Dan LaGracie, Quebec. Mark Guthier, Quebec. Carol Lessard, Quebec. And I'm sure there are more. And a shout out, and you may not know this, so this may be the first time you're hearing this tonight. A shout out to One America News here in the United States of America. And we posted the interview, folks. They had a segment about Canada that no other network in this country had dared challenge. One America News picked up the story. and there's going to be a lot more coming, I believe, from One America News and other networks as we progress. As long as we stay peaceful, as long as we stay within the framework of the law, you're going to see a lot of people, they're going to start jumping on this train. Nobody wants to jump on a train that's going to crash. Violence makes people crash. But peace and doing it within the framework of the law and using our heads. Sometimes our hearts say something else, but using our heads and doing what's right in the eyes of God and in the eyes of our fellow countrymen, we win and they lose. All right. We owe what we're doing to this next man and his colleagues and all the veterans of all these wars for freedom and liberty worldwide. I think we owe a lot to this fellow. And folks, his name is Mike Bell. Gotta love this guy after you hear him. But does he have a story we all need to hear? All right, I'm going to get right to it, folks. Here is Mike Bell. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, I have a very special guest from Canada. In fact, a hero. And you're going to hear his story right from his own mouth with regard to how he not only was a hero to the Canadian military and the Canadian people, but a hero to those of us here in the United States of America. Michael Bell, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much, sir.
Well, Mike, if you could be kind enough to just share with our audience a bit about your background, who you are, and if possible, Mike, if you just speak up a little bit, we'll be able to hear you better. But the audio is fine, just need to speak up a little. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, my name is Michael Bell. I served in the military for 8 years altogether. I've had a number of careers, Nortel Networks. With Nortel, I've had to travel all across Canada and United States. And currently, I am living back in New Brunswick, Canada, where I am semi-retired.
You know, you have a remarkable story regarding something that occurred in 1983. I remember that day. I believe it was October 23rd, 83. And I believe Reagan was in office at the time. But you were actually involved in the evacuation of U.S. Marines during the Beirut bombing, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
What happened that day, Mike? How about this way? Before that day happened, you obviously were stationed in the area for a while. So share with us from maybe a day or two before that happened, then what happened that day, what you did, and then the aftermath.
Okay, well, actually, to tell you the truth, prior to that day, my battalion was sent from Canada to Cyprus October 1st. And I had a position with company transport. And October 22nd, I was actually on duty as a duty driver. It's a 24-hour shift. Saturday night, pretty busy. The messes are open and everybody's relaxing. In any event, the next morning, I proceeded to the mess hall where I was met with my transport sergeant, Andy Wall, and he asked me, I realize it's a day off, could you volunteer to go to the Larnaca airport? There's a military C-130 coming, and we need you to go there and work with the load master to unload that flight and help people off that flight. I was given no other instruction. All I was told was, when you get to the airport, make sure that you go to the back gate. You can only access that area from the back gate. So off to Larnaca I went. And it's a 2-hour drive from where I was located in Nicosia. Beautiful day, early in the morning. It was probably about 8 o'clock in the morning when Sergeant Wall had actually sent me on that errand. So I arrive at Larnaca. I go to the back gate. There's a Greek policeman at that gate, and he lets me in. As soon as I'm in, there's an American Marine standing behind the gate. and he shows me to the area where I was supposed to be on the tarmac. The flight finally arrives, and the ramp opens up on the back of that aircraft and the side doors. And I start seeing Marines coming off that flight. I was also seeing a few civilians with their children. I saw 3 Marines approaching me right away. Now, this was really something for me because
Now, Mike, these were American Marines, U.S. Marines?
these were American Marines dressed in the fatigues of the day, the camouflage green fatigues that they used to wear. And 3 of them were approaching me, 2 on either side of a wounded Marine. The person in the middle was, he had bandage on his head. He had a Band-Aid. There was a little bit of blood coming out of it, and he had to be supported on either side by 2 other Marines. They were approaching me for instruction. What should we do? And as they were approaching me, the one Marine looked at the Canadian flag on my shoulder, and he said, "Hey, guys, there's a fellow neighbor of ours. He lives just across the falls." And I'm actually thinking, does he know me? Because I actually did live across from the falls. In any event, he told the other guys, "These are good people." So I felt extremely proud that there was another soldier recognizing me. Still had no clue what had just happened to these guys. And I thought, well, I better assist them to the loading area where the buses were. There were some British buses at the end of the tarmac. And as we were walking toward the buses, they started to tell me what their story was. They said, they asked me, and they said, "Did you hear about the bombing?" And I said, "No, actually, I didn't. I don't know what's going on." And they proceeded to tell me their story. And some of it was pretty horrific. They had the look of shock on their faces. And as they told the story, they became upset. They had just lost friends. The stories that they were relaying to me, I will not recount. They were pretty horrible. But in any event, I immediately started to feel a little bit overwhelmed myself, because at that point I realized these guys were just about 100 miles away from me, and what had happened to them could just as easily happen to us here in Cyprus, because like them, we were serving in a country that half was Muslim, half was Christian. And as a peacekeeper, we were in the middle of these people. In any event, I went back and forth from that flight, helping soldiers back and forth to the bus area, and then helping a loadmaster load all the equipment and their gear. And along the way, I was also expressing to them, "Hey, listen, guys, you're going to be completely safe here. If you don't know where you're going, you're headed toward Akrotiri. There's a large British base in Akrotiri. Actually, it's an Air Force base, and I had been there several times already, dropping off other soldiers from the UN for procedures at the hospital there. And knowing what they had just gone through, I thought, it's very important that these guys know that they're safe." And so I told them about the fighters that I saw on the landing strip there. Back in those days, they were Phantom fighters. In any event, I think I made a few friends that day. They welcomed my help, and I felt a little bit overwhelmed because I was just there by myself. As I said, I had no clue what was going on prior to that flight arriving. By the end of the day, They were all successfully loaded on there. British soldiers were driving the bus. They felt safe, and I thought, well, there, I've done my job. I did get them on the bus. They feel safe. They feel good, and they even smiled and waved goodbye to me. So that was quite something for me. End of the day, I had to head back 2 hours to Nicosia, where I was stationed, on the UN road. So the UN road is in a buffer zone, and either side is either Greek, Christian, or Muslim. Well, now I am traveling back down that road by myself for 2 hours with these thoughts in my head of what had just happened to these guys. And it was pretty scary because I realized, again, I'm on this road by myself. But I made it to Nicosia. And as I made it to Nicosia, I saw that the streets were awfully busy. There was a lot of news agents near where I was stationed in the Leger Palace, and there was large crowds of men gathered around these news agents. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to stop there, grab a paper, see what this is all about. There's something obviously happened here. Well, I had already known what had happened in Beirut, and I knew the stories from these Marines, but to pick up a paper and see the devastation of the barracks and whatnot, it was just horrendous. I actually had a sickening feeling inside, realizing like this is pretty serious. I'm 23 years old. I had just helped these people, and now I'm realizing my life is in danger potentially here. I had an awakened sense of awareness. I get back into the Leger Palace. The guys were asking me what you did, and I said, well, I went to the Larnaca airport, and I assisted some Marines that had just come from the Beirut explosion in Lebanon. They couldn't really relate to what I was saying because they weren't there. In any event, immediately in the area where I was serving in Nicosia, I saw banners starting to go up on the Turkish side, and the banners were actually saying "Death to Americans" and "Death to Westerners." I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. The environment started becoming a little bit more hostile than it was when we had first arrived there. On a daily basis, I used to have to go into that buffer zone. And in one area that I actually used to go to, the Turkish soldiers would crowd up over top of the roofs and load their AK-47s now and point them right at us, yelling and screaming in Arabic. And they had some pretty nasty looks on their face. And I realized that I was no longer safe here. Everything that I had thought, in the days previous, picking up those Marines and assisting them on those buses, things were now happening here in Cyprus. In any event, I think as a soldier, you end up accepting your duty and accepting the fact that, this is what the job is. You're in between two people. And they have their own issues there, but now they've been excited on the one side about what had just happened in Beirut, and they were expressing their anger toward us. Wasn't long after that, November 15th, the Turks on the island actually declared unilateral independence from Cyprus. They had actually taken advantage now of the situation and just said, enough's enough. We're taking half the island. This side's ours. The hostilities increased, and early in December, the Turks actually shot a Greek in my sector off a roof. Was becoming violent. I actually had to take my turn on the observation post in that area shortly afterwards. And in the early morning darkness, my partner and I, a private LeBlanc, we could hear a noise coming through the rubble in front of us. Most of these buildings were bombed out, and they had been left there since 1974. And we thought we heard something in front of us. Well, we do have night vision, so we took a look through the night vision, and we actually saw 2 Turkish soldiers approaching us with their bayonets out. We had the same exact orders as the U.S. Marines did in Beirut. Do not load your weapon unless you're fired upon. So I decided to go out in an area where they could see us. There was a building not too far away from me with a light on. And as they approached, I loaded my weapon. I was letting them know I'm not playing around here. My life felt threatened, and I loaded my weapon and pointed it at them. And then I raised my night vision, and I could clearly see them. They were a lot closer now. You could see the expression of anger on their faces. And luckily for me, that deterred them. They actually left the area. I realized from back then that heightened awareness that I had from assisting those Marines off that flight, and the stories that they told me actually saved my life. Because of my heightened awareness, I was suspicious of everything. And as you are aware, sir, if your senses are heightened and you're suspicious of what's going on in front of you, it will save your life. But it also gave me the realization that those Marines in Beirut, they had no awareness whatsoever of what was coming their way that day. They were there to help people out, just as we were there to help people out. We wanted to keep people from confrontation, and that's exactly what the Marines were doing that day. So it was with gratitude that I actually helped those Marines, and they embraced me the way they did. And to this day, I will never forget what they did for me. And as a matter of fact, they actually did it again. Just recently, they accepted me as a member of the Beirut Marine Association.
Oh, great.
Twice now they've embraced me, and I really appreciate it.
Well deserved. Mike, I what a compelling, heroic story. God has us at the right place at the right time, and he has the right people where he needs them to be. And you were that guy on that day chosen by the Almighty to do what you heroically did. I mean, listen, Mike, you don't, and I'm sure people will never underestimate what you did. You helped save the lives of Marines who were badly wounded. And through that, astounding, isn't it? I always say how God works in our lives, how these fellows gave you enough awareness, heightened your awareness to the dangers that were taking place. I will tell you this, I remember the time that when that occurred, and Reagan was quite upset. And it was scurrying as who ordered the U.S. Marines not to load their weapons unless fired upon. But you had the instinct. Isn't it interesting? Instinct does kick in. You had the instinct to load your weapon. You had your instinct to take the action you did. And, I'm thinking about your story, and I'm saying to myself, you know what, Mike? You're still fighting the good fight of faith for freedom and liberty. You're still doing a wonderful, wonderful thing and relaying your story to not only your fellow countrymen and women, but now Americans. And here's what's important about you being on the air tonight. Mike, I've said all along, never in the history of Canada and the United States have we, the people now, created such an alliance. Politicians have, organizations have, but the people of Canada and the United States are now joined together in the fight for freedom and liberty. And part of that fight for freedom and liberty is for us to think about and learn about the past and the heroes like yourself who in the past fought that good fight, but not only politically, but I mean physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I'm going to ask Mike if he'd do a few things down the road. I'd love for you to meet, and we can do this on social media, to meet a lot of our veterans here, to speak to them. We'll set the meetings up via Zoom. And I think, importantly, a lot of the young men and women in the service need to hear your story. And then I'm thinking along the lines of maybe some students, whether they be in college or high school. So you think about that. And if you're up to that, I'll tell you what, I'm at the edge of my seat here. Normally I'm not when I have guests on. But the way you expressed yourself and explained this is better than any professor that I know across any university, at least in this country, that could explain it the way you did. Now, Mike, has your government and the United States government in particular, have you heard from them at all after the aftermath of this?
No, to tell you the truth. We were really busy in Cyprus, and manning an OP was only a job that I had to do when other soldiers went on leave or something happened. I wasn't debriefed back there, not fully. Of course, I told the story to the other soldiers I worked with, but we weren't debriefed, and nothing ever happened after I got back from Cyprus. And it was only last summer I was attending an event with fellow veterans, and one of them actually mentioned to me, Mike, you've changed, and you need to go and see somebody. Prior to that, I wasn't talking about this too much. In all honesty, it was a bit upsetting for me, and how I handled all of the events from back then was to become a workaholic. I shoved everything in the back of my mind, but now there are fellow veterans telling me, Mike, there's something wrong, and you need to go and see somebody. So I did what they said. I contacted Veterans Affairs, and I ended up having to see a mental health professional, and in doing so, I was diagnosed with PTSD. Working several months with a highly trained professional, I started telling the story. I started to recount the story again. And as of yet, no, nothing's happened, other than I've been given some pain and suffering rewards from the military and a bit of a pension.
Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do, Mike. There are thousands and thousands of Canadians and Americans watching this broadcast. You're going to be hearing from them. Believe me, you're going to be hearing from them. And,
I appreciate that.
Or you are. And you're going to be hearing from us, because what I intend to do, I could never, you never tell what the government's going to do. We have that problem here in America. We've got so many great heroes like yourself who somehow the government either ignores, or they just inadvertently not pay attention to what certain people have done. But now that we know your story, we're going to relay your story and what you've done to some of our congressional representatives. And the process is very slow in government, but the process of the organization called Campaign for America is not. So you're going to be hearing from us again. And I've got to tell you, I'm very thankful to God that I could call you a fellow veteran, a friend, and what a credit you are to your country. But Mike, not only to your country, but to the United States. I mean, you were there helping American Marines, and that to me means a lot. So Mike, we're going to have you on again. Would you come on again sometime?
I most certainly will. I think, to tell you the truth, a lot of people don't realize that there is a price to be paid for freedom. And I think these kinds of stories do need to be told, that we can't be taking our freedom and liberty for granted.
I could not say that any better, Mike. Well, I thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to have you back on again, and I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Please thank your wife on behalf of the American people, because she's, I'll tell you what, God's blessed you with a wonderful wife. I had the opportunity to speak to her, and I'm so grateful that she's by your side all this time.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I will let her know, because she often surprises me.
Well, Mike, I salute you as one veteran to
Thank
another.
you, sir.
Thank you. God bless, and we'll be in touch with you. Thank you so very, very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Wow. You know, there's a lot of wows in this world, and there's one of them right there. So, folks, there's his email. I would be grateful. I know if you can just send him a thank you for what he did for freedom and liberty as a military veteran there in Canada. And I know there are American veterans where we're going to get him in touch with them. So this story isn't over. All right. This story isn't over. So I'm going to wrap it up, because I know Shadow Davis is going to be coming on, I think, 9 Eastern time. And I certainly urge you to go to his broadcast. So look, folks, again, just to reemphasize, we'll never give up our right to have rallies, right? Our right to assembly. We're never going to give that up. That's a constitutional right in the United States. It's a great way of heightening public awareness. But let us always be sure that when we do assemble somewhere and we have rallies, that they're well organized, that there are people in charge who have cool heads and who can lead, really lead rally goers in the right direction. I've seen rallies in America that tens of thousands of people would show up and they'd be very peaceful. And then you'd have rallies, maybe 2,000 people showed up. They're peaceful up to a point, and then the anarchists and those troublemakers come in. So it's always good to have people in charge, cool heads. You can get your point across, believe me, just in sheer numbers. I know some people, they want to hear that, but it's worked. It's worked very well. Of course, we've had very violent confrontations here between groups that rally and the police, etc. And we're trying to deal with that here in America. But I'm talking about for the causes of freedom and liberty. It's worked here, and it's working very well now. So we're trying to even talk to people in our own country here in America is to lower the temperature. Let's start talking sense. Let's start using strategy. I'm sure a guy like Mike Bell would tell you, as I and any other veteran would tell you, you don't go into combat without a plan. You don't go into combat without a strategy, without tactics. The plan is to secure freedom and liberty. The strategy is to do it in a peaceful way. And the tactics are what? Work within the framework of the law. And probably the greatest thing, folks, is, and I cannot overemphasize this, as the pastor did, the power of prayer. So maybe we'll be talking about that some more at some other time. All right, you got a great show coming on, folks. Shadow Davis, tune into him. I gave you that list of great leaders. If you know where they are, who they are, reach out to them and thank them. And folks, we're going to have a great show next Thursday night. And look, all I can say is I'm thrilled. I'm really thrilled over what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing. I guess I'm thrilled more than anything else, because I know that there is a King of Kings and Lord of Lords who gave us the gifts of liberty and freedom, and he ain't going to let anybody take it from us. Isn't that great to know? Well, maybe the other side should know about that. All right, folks, remember 3 words. Let freedom ring. God bless you all. Have a great week. See you next Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. God bless you all.